Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Namaskaram. Today I'm going to be talking about verse 129 of Guru Vācaka Kōvai. The meaning of this verse is that is the literal translation is like confusedly considering the going and coming of a vehicle to be their own going and coming. Those who do not know their own reality experience suffering, taking the body-soul linked samsara to be upon them. And I've written an explanatory paraphrase for that. Like confusedly or bewilderedly considering the going and coming of a vehicle in which they are seated to be their own going and coming, those who do not know or are not aware of their own reality experience suffering by taking samsara, a whirling cycle of birth and death, which is linked to or experienced by deha uya. Deha uya literally means the body soul, but it refers to ego, which is the soul that is always aware of itself as I am this body. Or we can also take it as the embodied soul, but the soul seems to be embodied because of its identification with the body. That is the nature of ego. Which is linked to suffer by taking samsara, which is linked to the body soul, to be something that has come upon them. That is, they mistake the seemingly ceaseless cycle of birth and death to be something that is actually happening to them. This cycle of birth and death obviously involves much more than birth and death. I mean, the actual being born and dying, because between birth and death, we go through so many experiences. We go through so many joys and sorrows and all sorts of experiences. And we are constantly being buffeted by the experiences we undergo. We experience so much pain and pleasure in this life because of our identification with this body. And because we're identified with this body, we seem to be a part of this vast samsara. And so we have to suffer all the joys and sorrows. Bhagavan identifies the cause of this. That is, he implies what the cause of it all is not knowing our own reality. If we know what we actually are, we wouldn't mistake ourselves to be this body. And if we didn't mistake ourselves to be this body, it wouldn't seem to us that we are undergoing samsara. We seem to be undergoing samsara only because of our identification with the body. And so Bhagavan is always emphasizing that ego, which is the I that is aware of itself as I am this body, that is the root cause of all our problems. And this ego is a false awareness of ourself, because it's an awareness of ourself as that which is aware of, that is, as ego, we're always aware of ourselves as I am this body. This body is not what we actually are. So this is therefore a mistaken or a false awareness of ourself. Since it's a false awareness of ourself, it can be removed only by correct awareness of ourself. If we see a rope and mistake it to be a snake, the only way to get rid of that misperception, that illusion that it is a snake, is to see what it actually is. As soon as we see that it's actually just a rope, the illusion that it's a snake is removed forever. Likewise, when we know what we actually are, this ego, the false, that which is always aware of itself as I am this body, will thereby be destroyed. So all that is required is that we know what we actually are. And in order to know what we actually are, we need to investigate ourselves. This is the fundamental logic of Bhagavan's teachings. It's so simple. But because we we, having identified ourselves with this body, just like someone who is seated in a vehicle, not doing anything, thinks I'm traveling here and there. I'm flying from Chennai to London to New York to here and there. What is the person doing? They're simply sitting in a chair in a seat in the plane. They're not doing anything, but they identify the movements of the vehicle in which they're traveling to be their own movements. And in the same way, this body is at best just a vehicle. But when we, because we identify this body as I, all that comes to this body, and this body doesn't mean just the physical form of the body, it means the whole bundle of five sheaves, this mind and intellect and will, and well, body, life, mind, intellect, and will, basically, it's the five sheaves. We take this bundle to be ourself, and so we seem to be undergoing so many all the ups and downs of life. We seem to be undergoing birth and death, and everything that comes between birth and death all seems to be happening to us, but none of it is actually happening to us. If we know what we actually are, we'll know none of these things have ever touched us or ever could touch us. So that's the basic idea of the verse. Sadhu Om was also given a paraphrase. The meaning of his paraphrase is, like considering the going and coming of vehicles, such as a cart, that they have boarded and are traveling in to be their own going and coming, ajnanis who do not know their own real swarupa, swarupa means what they actually are, undergo suffering, taking samsara. Samsara means embodied existence, in which one whirls around in the cycle of birth and death, taking the samsara in the form of pravritti. Pravritti means the outwardly directed activity and exertion. So all the mental activity, the outward flow of our attention, this is samsara. Taking this samsara in the form of pravritti, which happens to the spurious soul, who is ego, to be what is actually happening to themselves, who is Atman. That is, none of these things actually happening to what we actually are, to Atman or Swarupa, whatever we call it. It's only happening to ego. And this ego is not what we actually are. This ego is ego is a conflation of the pure awareness I am with this body which is devoid, which is jada, devoid of awareness. So long as we rise as ego, we seem to be undergoing samsara, but none of this is real. None of this is actually happening to us. So in order to be free of samsara, all we need to do is to be free of ego. And in order to be free of ego, all we need to do is to know what we actually are. And we can know what we actually are only by investigating ourselves. This analogy Bhagavan uses here of taking the movements of a vehicle to be our own movement. This is an analogy he often used. For example, when visitors came, and if they'd be asking him questions, he said, see, you think you come from some faraway place, from Delhi or from London or New York or wherever. You think you have traveled here, but you haven't actually traveled at all. It's simply you sat in vehicles, and these vehicles have brought you here. You sat in a ship or in a train or in a car or in a bullock cart or whatever. The vehicle was moving. You take the movement of a vehicle to be your own movement. Likewise, this body is a mere vehicle. If you identify this body as I, all that the body undergoes, you'll experience as yourself undergoing. So it's this fundamental identification, this false awareness, I am this body, that is the cause of all our trouble. So we need to free ourselves from this by knowing what we actually are. But in order to know what we actually are, we need to be willing to give up our attachment to the body, to our to the person we take ourselves to be, our identity, everything, the whole story of our life, everything that we identify with. I am a Hindu, I'm a Buddhist, I'm a Christian, I'm a Jew, I'm a Muslim, I'm Indian, I'm Chinese, I'm Russian, I'm American, I'm French, I'm British, whatever it is. All these, everything we identify ourselves whether it is with a religion or with a nationality or a particular racial type or a particular political view or a particular philosophy, whatever it is, it's all rooted in this fundamental identification, I am this body. And this is it's a false identity. It's not what we actually are. What we actually are is just that pure awareness, I am. That's why Bhagavan often used this term nan nan or aham aham. That means I am I. What I actually am is nothing but I. In other words, I'm nothing other than myself, which is obvious, but we overlook it because we identify this with this body, with this person we seem to be, and so all these troubles come to us. So the Bhagavan's path is the only direct and the ultimate path to free ourselves from samsara. Until we know what we actually are, we will inevitably be bound by samsara. And it will go on ceaselessly, life after life after life, with all its joys and sorrows. So we need to be willing to give up all these things in order to know ourselves as we actually are. So long as we still have desire for these things, still have the attachment for these things, we will not be willing to turn our entire attention within to know ourselves as we actually are. Because as Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Ulladu Napadu, if ego comes into being, everything comes into being. If ego is not, everything is not. Ego itself is everything. Therefore, investigating what it is giving up everything. That is, if we investigate what this ego is, this ego will subside and dissolve back into its source because it has no real existence. And in the absence of ego, everything else ceases to exist because all other things, the whole of samsara, the whole of this vast universe, all these multiverses that some scientists nowadays believe in, all this heaven and hell, all whatever it is, whatever world we experience or we believe to exist, all these exist only in the view of ego. It's only when we rise as ego that the world seems to exist. So we need to be willing to give up everything. That's why Bhagavan wasn't particular about external forms of renunciation. Bhagavan wasn't opposed to external forms of renunciation, but he said all these things are according to prarabdha. For some people, their prarabdha is to be married and have 10 children. Other people, it's their prarabdha to be a sannyasi or a celibate or whatever. These are none of these are either in themselves, they're not intrinsically an obstacle or an aid. I mean, they can be if we take them in the right way. Even a household life can be an aid in the spiritual life. A household life means a family life, because in a family life you have to make sacrifices for the sake of others. So it can be an aid for moving away from the self-centeredness. So whatever our prarabdha may be, if we take it in the right spirit, if we approach it in the right spirit, it can be an aid. But the real renunciation is not any form of external renunciation. It is the renunciation of this false identity, I am this body. And the means to renounce that is to investigate the I that is aware of itself as I am this body, namely this ego. And if we investigate this ego, we will find that what seemed to be ego is actually just the pure awareness that we actually are. Just like if we look carefully at what seems to be a snake, we'll see it's just a rope. If we look carefully at this ego that is aware of itself as I am this body, the adjuncts will drop off and the pure I am that we actually are alone will remain. So this is one of the beauties of Guru Vācaka Kōvai. Almost any verse we look at in Guru Vācaka Kōvai, we can find Bhagavan's teaching fully packed in there. That is, not just the meaning of the verse itself, but all the implications that we can draw from it, all the connections we can make with other elements of Bhagavan's teachings. These verses of Guru Vācaka Kōvai are a wonderful aid that Bhagavan has given us to keeping our mind absorbed in his teachings. Second only to his own original writings, Guru Vācaka Kōvai is such an important work. Because in Guru Vācaka Kōvai, many things that are implied but not stated explicitly in Bhagavan's original writings, they're stated explicitly in Guru Vācaka Kōvai. Does anyone have any questions about this verse or about the implications of this verse?
Yes. Yeah. Rati wanted to ask a question about the verse.
Yes, Michael, let me just change the view to speaker view. I want to see you, look at you straight. Let's see here. Okay, that's okay. Okay, well, actually, I just wanted to ask you, and I wanted to first start by saying that this is a wonderful analogy that that Bhagwan has used. Not Bhagwan, I mean, of course, Bhagwan through Guru Vācaka Kōvai, through Muruganar, has used this verse of the Vahanam being the vehicle, and the vehicle and the Pokum Varavum of the vehicle, the coming and going of the vehicle, and the fact that it's a beautiful example for the reason that just like you're standing on a platform of a railway station and you feel the train is moving and you think that you're still or something like that, or you don't know if you're still and the train is moving, and there's always that confusion. And similarly, when you're coming and going, there's all this body is a strange thing. It just you have a sense of the body more when you travel, which is why probably people love to travel. People love to travel because they feel that taking the body physically and going here and there, but actually we're all just in one point in time. We don't move at all. We're just one point in time. But again, what I wanted to say first is that he wants you to Bhagwan, I mean not Bhagwan, Muruganar in verse 129, this verse wants you to focus on the fact that we need to focus on the substratum, which is the vehicle, that we are, just like in the dog and the stone, or the rope and the snake, you focus on the substratum. Like in the rope and the snake, you focus on the substratum of the rope and not the snake, not see the snake. Similarly, in the dog and the stone, you see the stone and not the dog. You're mostly absorbed or aware of the underlying substratum, which is your inner Atma Swarupa. And so that's what we need to feel. But however, we're often, because of our bodies and because of the, coming out of our outwardly, coming to outward form, we do this. So my question to you here is this, this analogy of the vehicle, is this the best analogy that he is that is this his own analogy first of all, Gurmuruganar, or did he get it from anywhere else? And also did even the stone and the dog and the stone was already there in Vācaka or somebody else's old 13th century literature, right?
Yes. Well, firstly, Vācaka Kōvai, the verses are composed by Muruganar, but the ideas that are conveyed by those verses are Bhagavan's own sayings. That's why it's called Vācaka Kōvai. It's a collection of the Guru's sayings. So these verses are capturing the essence of what Bhagavan said on particular occasions. So this analogy of the vehicle, I don't know. This may well be there in some old texts, but this was definitely one of Bhagavan's an analogy Bhagavan often used. I don't think we have to be concerned about where the analogy comes from. Some analogies may be, I mean, there's certainly some analogies, they don't come to my mind now, but Bhagavan used, but were original. Well, for example, the cinema analogy, because in those days, cinema was in the early days of Bhagavan, for example, when he wrote Aranachashtakam, that would have been about in the early, that would have been perhaps about sometime between 1912 to 1914, in that sort of period. So cinema was a very new technology in those days. In those days, Bhagavan would never have seen a movie film, because there definitely weren't movies when he was there in Madurai after coming to Tiruvannamalai. But he heard about these things, and this was a perfect
No, I think
analogy.
Bhagwan had seen movies, hadn't he? Because he had seen, I know, a couple of movies about Nandanar and
That's much later. That's
or
much
later.
later. That film about Nandana, I think it was made in the 1930s. But I'm talking about when Bhagavan, in verse 6 of Aranachashtakam, he uses this analogy of a cinema projector.
Mhm.
So that definitely, nowadays, many people, almost anyone who gives talks on Vedanta will use this analogy. But that analogy wasn't available before because the technology wasn't there. Bhagavan himself said in later years, it's recorded in talks or somewhere, I can't remember where, Bhagavan said, Shankara used the analogy of a city reflected in a mirror, because that was a mirror was the technology that was available in those days. If he had been living now, he would have given the analogy of a cinema projector. Because I mean that analogy of the city reflected in a mirror. This is in Dakshinamurti Stotram. Which was the appropriate analogy to give in the context of those times. But in the context of modern times, Bhagavan will take modern things. Even though when he composed Aranachashtakam, he wouldn't have ever seen a movie. I mean, movie films began to become popular in the 1920s with Charlie Chaplin and everything. And also very quickly the Indian cinema developed. But it was all very... it was in the 1920s and 30s that it really took off. So it was even before that, but Bhagavan would have heard about this technology, but heard about how a movie film can be projected, and he used it because it's a perfect analogy. So some analogies Bhagavan used are original. I mean, they analogies that haven't been used before. Many of the analogies he used were analogies that had been used before. But he also often, when he's using a classical analogy, he will draw out deeper meanings. Because, for example, the snake rope analogy is generally applied to the appearance of the world. But Bhagavan applied it more deeply to this identification with the body. That is, we are mistaking ourselves to be something other than what we actually are. And this is what I wanted to say something you were saying. I can't remember exactly what it was. That is, you were talking about the substratum. To see the substratum, how can we see the substratum? All we need to do is to look at what the substratum appears to be, and we find out what the substratum actually is. The substratum, in the case of a rope snake, for example, the rope is the substratum, the snake is the appearance. But if you look at the appearance carefully enough, you will see the substratum. That doesn't apply if we take the world to be, that is the world to be the snake, and however carefully we look at the world, we're not going to find Brahman behind it. But if we apply it to this false identification, I am the body, then we can say, yes, if you look at this snake, this ego that is now aware of itself as I am this body, we find out what we actually are. Because the truth is, there are not two eyes. One eye called ego and another eye called the self, as people say. There's only one eye. When that one eye shines in it as it is, in its pure condition, that is what we call Atman or Swarupa or whatever, Brahman, whatever. When it is conflated with adjuncts as I am this body, we call it ego. But it's the same I. There aren't two eyes. One is the I seemingly limited by being conflated with adjuncts. The other is the I that is unlimited. Satyam Jnanam Anantam, unlimited being and awareness.
Yes, but also, Michael, the substratum, going the vehicle, the stone, the rope, and the snake, all that goes back in Aksharamanamala. He talks about the inner eye, the kan. You look for the inner eye, the inner
Yes.
ear,
Yes.
the ear behind the ear, the eye behind the eye,
Yes,
which
yes.
sees
Well,
without seeing.
the
The
eye
eye
behind the
behind the
eye or
eye.
the ear behind the ear
Yeah,
is
yes.
the mind, the attention. That is, as he says in verse 6 of Uludu Napadu, the world is the form of the five sense perceptions, five sense impressions. There, Andrew, nothing else. So what this world is nothing but a collection of sights, sounds, tastes, smells, and tactile sensations. If you take away all these things, where is there any world? So, but we experience these sights and these sounds and everything, and we construct out of that this world. I mean, we even the sights and sounds themselves are a mental construct, but out of they provide the building blocks for this bigger construct of the whole world. So what is knowing the sights, what is knowing the sounds, etc., that is the mind. The mind is that power of attention which we are generally sending out through the senses, constantly perceiving this world. That same power of attention, that same mind that is usually going outwards, that is usually choosing the path of pravritti, if we turn it back within, that's on the path of nivritti, withdrawal, that same power of attention that has constructed all this world, if we turn it back towards ourselves, it will subside and dissolve back into the substratum, which is the pure awareness I am. That is, the mind is a form of awareness, but it's outwardly directed awareness. In day by day, there are a couple of places where people ask Bhagavan, what is the difference between the mind and the self? And Bhagavan said, there's no difference. The same mind, when facing outwards, we call it ego, or mind. When you turn it within, we call it Swarupa or Atman or Brahman or pure awareness or whatever.
Yes. Michael, in the
So
Omkaram,
that is the inner eye. That attention is the inner eye. But
right,
we are
right.
directing that
Self-attentiveness.
inner eye, we are directing outwardly.
Mm,
Bhagavan says in that verse, um, uh, um, Tirumbi aham. Tirumbi aham means turning within. Dinam ahakang, tanne dinam ahakankang. Tanne means oneself. Dinam means daily or always.
mm,
Ahakankang. See yourself by that inner eye.
yeah,
So the same attention that we are now using to know the world, we need to use that same attention to know ourselves.
yeah. And just the simple word
That's what he
par,
called ahamukam, facing
ahamukam.
inwards, facing
Yes.
towards I.
Oh yeah, aha nokam or ahamukam. But
Yeah,
also the seeing is par, just par. It always ends his verses with par.
yeah, see,
para
yeah,
means see. So see clearly. Use your
yeah,
attention to look at that snake, look at that dog, look at the
yeah,
screen, the substratum, and all that.
yeah,
But
yeah.
in Om Namah Shivaya, there's the Vahanam Vrishabhoyasya Vasuki Kandabhushanam Vame Shakti Dharam Devam Vakaraya Namo Namaha. That
Mm,
is the Va in the Om Namah Shivaya Omkaram. You
mm.
know, so that again talks about the Vahanam. What exactly what exactly is that Shakti, or is it that is the what is in that Omkaram? What is that Shakti that is being referred to?
I'm not familiar with that passage you've just quoted.
It's not a passage. It's a Omkaram is the prayer. Om Namah Shivaya.
Yeah,
On
Om
that we
Namah Shivaya.
chant each of those. Not Om actually. Namah Shivaya. Namah Shivaya. For each of those aksharas,
Mm,
there is a verse, and so
right.
Vahanam Vrishabhoyasya Vasuki Kandabhushanam Vame Shakti Dharam Devam Vakaraya Namo Namaha. So that's the va in the Om Namah Shivaya. So if
Yeah.
that's all, that's okay. Shakti probably refers to the vehicle or the substratum. I've
Well,
taken a lot of your time. I think Angelika.
Shakti, the mind is Shakti.
Mhm.
That is, there's one Shakti, one ultimate
Parameshwara
power.
Shakti. Oh,
That is that ultimate power is not other than Shiva. So that is the power of just being. But when we misuse that power, that Chit Shakti, instead of using the Chit Shakti, the power of knowing, the power of awareness, to know ourselves, when we use it to know other things, it that is what is called the mind. And it is this mind that has created everything. That's why Bhagavan says in the beginning of the fourth paragraph of Nana, um, uh, the mind is an Adiseya Shakti, a wonderful power that exists in Atma-swarupa. It, it causes the appearance of all thoughts. By allowing our attention to go outwards, we create this whole world, which, as he says in that same paragraph, it's nothing but thoughts,
yes.
just like
So
a dream.
we must go into Maunam, which is silence. We need to go into silence.
Silence is our own being.
Yes.
The truth is, we are always in silence. Silence is not something we need to look for as if it was something other than ourselves. Our own being is silence. So to go into being means to turn our attention back towards ourselves.
Yes.
Bhagavan said, the, the teaching through words is secondary. The primary teaching, the most powerful teaching, the only teaching that ultimately can reveal the truth is, is monam, silence. That silence he's talking about is the silence, the infinite silence of pure being. So we need to stop the same attention that we're now using to directing outwards to create all of this. We need to turn it back towards our own being. And to the extent to which we attend to our being, we thereby subside into our being. So if we want to listen to Bhagavan's silent teachings. Listening to his silent teaching means attending to our being.
Yes. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Arunachala Ramanaya. Thank you, Michael.
Right.
There's a question. The next question is, when somebody is interested in moving from ego to self-love, being so conditioned in ego's woven web of self-deception, how can somebody introduce self-love, self-inquiry into the closed-off mind of hope and healing? And is self-love and self-awareness the one reality? Thank you.
We all have self-love. Self-love is our very nature. Even someone, for example, someone who commits suicide, they are doing that out of self-love, because what they're killing is this body. They see the body as the cause of their trouble, so out of love for themselves, they kill the body. So we all have self-love. The problem is, because of the wrong identification, I am this body, we have diverted this self-love away from our being towards our rising, towards this body and mind and all these things. We take ourselves to be this body and mind. So if anyone says anything unkind about this person that we seem to be, we feel hurt by it. Well, why should we be hurt? This body, this person we take ourselves to be is not ourselves. But we, just like someone in the vehicle mistaking the movements of the vehicle to be their own movements, we are so intimately identified with this bundle of five sheaves, this body or this person that we take ourselves to be, that we we don't like people to say unkind things about us. We may have certain views, certain beliefs, and when we state our beliefs, others may disagree with us, and we feel upset by it. Why doesn't this person agree? So it's all because of this wrong identification. So what we need to do is to hold on to our being, in other words, attend to our being, and thereby subside back into our being. So the self-love is always there, but it is misdirected because of this false identification. So we need to direct it back to what we essentially are, to our own being, to this fundamental awareness I am. So how to switch our love, our self-love, from this, what we now take ourselves to be, back to what we actually are, the means is vichara. So long as we are allowing our attention to go outwards, the more we allow our attention to go outwards, the more we are reinforcing this false awareness, I am this body. When instead of allowing our attention to flow outwards, if we turn our attention back towards ourselves, we begin to separate ourselves from this person whom we seem to be, and thus we subside back into our being. So the whatever question we ask, how, the solution is vichara. That's why Bhagavan emphasized this vichara, this investigation, this self-attentiveness. He emphasized this so much because this is the one solution to all the problems we face. Yes, what is the greatest obstacle in this path? It's our lack of love for this. But why we have a lack of love for it? Because of the strength of our identification with this bundle of five sheaves. We think our happiness depends on external things. And so our mind is always going out towards these external things. So whatever way we think of it, we have to, the only solution is to attend to ourselves. To the extent to which we attend to ourselves, we thereby subside. And subside means that the adjuncts with which we are now identified, well, they are not binding us. We are binding ourselves to them. So to the extent to which we attend to our being, we are letting go of our hold on these adjuncts that we mistake ourselves to be. So in that way, we are separating ourselves from this false identity. So that's why this practice of Atma-vichara is so important. Because of the strength of our desires and attachments, which are all rooted in self-love, but self-love that has been distorted by this false identification, the only way to overcome all this obstacle in the form of our attachment for other things, our desire for other things, is to cultivate the love to know ourselves. And the way to cultivate the love to know ourselves is this practice of Atma-vichara, this practice of turning our attention within, fixing our attention on ourselves. And we will definitely, when we try this, we will fail. We're constantly failing, but we shouldn't be disheartened by the failure, because we cannot succeed without trying again. So, and what seems to us to be a failure is not actually a failure, because we couldn't fail if we didn't try. If you fail something, it means you've tried for it, but you didn't succeed. But the very fact that we are trying is itself means we're moving in the right direction. So we should never be disheartened by our failure. We should keep on trying, because the more we try, the closer we are coming to finally succeeding. I hope that's a clear answer to that question.
The next question is, if we don't rise as ego, is there any need or use for Shakti power?
Shakti is our very being. Power is our very being. Because we misused our power to rise as ego, we need to use that power correctly to be as we actually are. So the sole purpose of all power is just to be, not to rise. But so that power, but when we use that power to rise, the power then takes the form of Maya. But so long as we are caught up in Maya, that same power is working within us in the form of grace, slowly drawing us back within. So we need to yield to that power of grace. The power of Maya is the power that pulls the mind outwards. The power of grace is the power that pulls the mind inwards. Essentially, they're the same power, because they're not two different powers. It's how we use the power. So if you want to surrender to the power of grace, we need to try to turn within. And that power of grace, that is the supreme power. That is the power of being. There's a verse Bhagavan composed on Shakti and Shanti. Shanti means peace. Shakti is power. Bhagavan said the same that basically, I can't remember the exact wording of the verse, but the basic meaning is that it's the same. It's the same. Shakti and Shanti are one. Sadhu Om gave a very nice analogy for this. He said, which is more powerful? A dam that is holding a vast quantity of water in a motionless condition, or a dam that cracks and begins to allow that water out? Obviously, the dam that is holding the water without cracking, that is stronger than the dam that is under the pressure of water cracking. So he said all the external displays of power are a weakness. So the power that has created this world is a weakness, because it's just like the dam that is under the pressure of water, it's cracking and allowing the water out. And if it cracks too much, the whole dam will be washed away and that water will come destroying everything. So our present condition is like that. We have, due to weakness, we have allowed all that power to go outwards. By this practice of self-attentiveness, we are regaining the power to hold all that power within ourselves, to keep the power centered on our own being. And that produces the state of peace, which is our natural state. All this activity is unnatural. That's why we're never fully happy in a state of activity. True happiness can be found only in perfect peace. And peace is nothing but that power that holds the awareness centered on itself, rather than allowing it to go outwards. So any outward display of power is just a weakness. The true power is the power of just being as we actually are. So the power of grace is always greater than the power of Maya. But the power of Maya is a weakness. The power of grace is strength. I think what Bhagavan says in that verse is something like, what is seen outwardly as power is, if you look within it, is peace. Something to that effect.
Yeah. The next
Talking
question.
of original analogies, that analogy of the dam Sadhu Om gave, that I think is an original analogy. I've never come across that anywhere, but that explains the idea very, very nicely. Yes, sorry, Shalini, I interrupted.
No, I'm actually getting confused. I was meditating for a bit. If the mind is being frequently captured by pravritti, that is an outward focus which is not interested in nivritti. What would Ramana's recommendation be to counter this?
Bhagavan would say exactly what he said, what he in the form of Krishna said to Arjuna. Arjuna, in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, that's a chapter in which Krishna is emphasizing that we need to keep the mind fixed on ourselves and not think of anything else. Atma-samstam mana kritva na kinchit api chintayat. About 10 verses later, Arjuna says, how is this possible? This mind is more difficult to control than the wind. And Krishna's reply to that is, yes, it is true, the mind is very difficult to control, but by abhyasa and vairagya, it is possible. Abhyasa means practice. Vairagya means freedom from any inclination to know other things. Bhagavan defined vairagya in Nana as anyate nadade irtal vairagyam aladu nirase. That means being without allowing the mind to attend to anything other than itself. That is vairagya or nirasa. Nirasa means desirelessness. Asa is desire, nirasa is freedom from desire. Likewise, vairagya, raga is passion, viraga is freedom from passion. Their passion there means the outgoing desire. So how to get that vairagya? By abhyasa. So ultimately, it all comes back to practice. So what Krishna, Bhagavan Ramana and Bhagavan Krishna are not two different Bhagavans, they're the same Bhagavan. So in what he taught to Arjuna there in the Bhagavad Gita is what he's teaching in this, when he came in the form of Bhagavan Ramana. Practice is absolutely essential. Bhagavan said, nobody can succeed in this without perseverance. This is not your birthright. You have to turn within and subside is not our birthright. We have to work for it. We have to constantly practice. So it is possible, however difficult it may seem to be, and it does seem to be difficult to all of us because we have such strong Vishaya Vasana, such strong inclinations to go outwards. It seems very, very difficult, but we can overcome this by constant practice, by constantly trying to turn our attention back within. As Bhagavan says in the 6th paragraph of Nana, after explaining that however many thoughts arise, as and when each thought arises, it's necessary to investigate to whom. Investigating to whom means turning our attention back to ourselves, the one to whom everything else appears. And if we do that and then hold on to that, the mind will return to its birthplace, and whatever had arisen will subside. And then he says, Ipati paraka paraka. By practicing and practicing in this way, manataku tampirapiditil tangi nikam shakti adikindadu. For the mind, the power to remain in its birthplace, in its source, the place from which it rose, increases. So the practice is absolutely essential. So whatever we ask, Bhagavan will direct us back to the same practice, because this is the only solution to the problem. It may seem to us to be very difficult to hold on to self-attentiveness, but that doesn't mean we can't try. And if we try, every moment we manage to hold on to self-attentiveness, we are getting one step closer to our goal. So we should treasure that is the value of a moment of self-attentiveness is worth more than all the treasures of the world. This is the supreme treasure. So we should cherish this self-attentiveness so much. And we should go on trying until eventually we will certainly, if we persevere, we will certainly succeed. Because, as I say, the power of grace has to be greater than the power of Maya. The power of Maya is a weakness. The power of grace is strength. So when we turn our attention within, we are yielding ourselves to that power of grace. So if you want to invoke the supreme power, the way to invoke that supreme power is to turn the mind within. Otherwise, we are yielding to the power of Maya, which is a misuse of the same one power that is what we actually are.
Michael, I'll ask the question which was sent by email.
Okay, yes.
It says, Dear Michael, if you could refer to the following, please. Is it correct to say that the universe as we see it self-actualizes itself through us, that is, through our senses, and that projection takes place as the rising of the ego? If yes, does it mean that the rising of ego takes place only once in this very moment, and that all other moments which we consider to be past also take place now when we think them? You say that what we project is our prarabdha. How could it be so detailed? Litter dropped onto the pavement by someone, a bird sitting on a branch, a mug left on the kitchen table last night, a crack in the wall, etc. Is it that ego remembers its projection, and next time when it rises again, which is always the first time, it adds to its projection new elements? Hope I have expressed myself carefully. Thank you, dear Michael, for your attention.
Okay. Does the ego rise only once? In a way, we could say so, but what we need to understand is as soon as we rise as ego, we bring into being, well, we rise as ego, projecting and identifying a body as I. And as soon as we project a body, we also project a world, because a body exists in a world. So we bring time and space into being as soon as we rise as ego. So long as we have risen as ego, we seem to be caught up in the flow of time. So to say that the rising of the ego takes place only once, in a certain sense, it may be true, but it's not very helpful to us. The fact is, now we have risen as ego. We are dancing about as ego. How do we solve this problem? We solve the problem by turning our attention back to our source. That is, to our own being, I am. And by holding on to our being, we bring about the subsidence of ego. And when ego subsides, time, space, everything else subsides along with it. So long as ego rises, there is the appearance of time. But the time obviously is not real. It has no existence independent of ego. Regarding the first question, is it correct to say that the universe as we see it self-actualizes itself through us, i.e. through our senses, and that projection takes place as rising as ego? I think it is, if we say the universe as we see it, well, the universe as we see it, there's no universe other than what we see. That the world has no existence, as Bhagavan says in verse 6 of Ulladu Napadu, the world is nothing but the 5 kinds of sense impressions. So there's no world other than our perception of it. There's not an independently existing world that we come and perceive. So to say that the universe self-actualize itself, it's not the universe that is self-actualizing itself. The universe is nothing but a mental fabrication. The universe is created by us by the very act of our rising as ego. That is, rising as ego entails projecting and taking a body to be I. And projecting a body entails projecting a world, because the body doesn't exist in a vacuum, it exists in a world. So the whole thing is all a creation of the mind. As Bhagavan says in the 4th paragraph of Nana, he uses an analogy which comes from one of the Upanishads, the spider spinning out the thread from within itself. But whereas in the Upanishad it is said Brahman projects the world from within itself and draws it back into itself, Bhagavan is more precise. He says it is mind that does so. Bhagavan is not contradicting what is said in the Upanishad, because it is Brahman in the form of mind that has projected this. But Bhagavan always emphasizes the role of the mind. Mind here means ego, the knowing element of the mind. So it's just like a spider spins out thread and draws it back into itself. That is, people are sometimes a bit puzzled by this analogy. This is referring to, sometimes we see a spider descending from the ceiling or from some branch or something. It's descending on a thread. So it's rejecting the thread out of itself, and when it wants to go back up, it pulls the thread, it takes the thread back into itself. So like that, the mind projects the world from within itself and draws it back into itself. So the world is nothing but a mental fabrication. It has no existence whatsoever independent of the mind. And how does the mind project the world? Through the lens of the five senses. So the very rising of ego entails projecting a body, and through the senses of that body, a world. So that's all part of the rising of ego. So the root problem is our rising as ego. Whatever problems when we look at the world, we see so many problems, so many natural disasters. We see the inherent imperfection of embodied existence. So long as we seem to be a body, we seem to have been born, and since we were born, we're going to die one day. As Krishna says in the Gita, one of the verses of Bhagavan also translated into Tamil in chapter 2. For those who are born, death is certain. For those who die, birth is certain. That is, it's so long as we identify ourselves with a body, we experience birth, and it will end in death. But it doesn't end there, because the one the I that identifies this body as I then projects another body. So this birth and death, this is inevitable so long as we rise as ego. But it's all the results of our rising as ego. The whole universe is nothing but, that is the cause for this universe, is nothing but the rising of ego. As soon as we rise as ego, we project a universe. Whether this universe or any other, whether it's with the world we project is heaven or hell or whatever it is, it's all a mental fabrication. It has no existence independent of ego, the mind that sees it. If we take what Bhagavan says in that verse 6 of Uludunapadu, if we pay close attention to it, he says, Uluhu I'm Pulangal Uru. The world is a form of five sense impressions. There, Andrew, not anything else. So the world is nothing but these five kinds of sense impressions. The five sense impressions are impressions to the five sense organs. Since the mind alone, or the one mind, perceives the world by way of the five sense organs, is there a world besides the mind? So there's no world independent of the mind. So the mind here means when he said the mind alone perceives the world, he's talking about the knowing element of the mind. That is ego. So there's no world apart from ego. This is why he says in verse 26 of Ulunabdu, if ego comes into being, everything comes into being. If ego is not, everything is not. So I'm just seeing the questions again. Does it mean that the rising of ego takes place only once in this very moment? In a sense, as I said earlier, in a sense we can say that, but it doesn't seem like that, because as soon as we rise as ego, we seem to get caught up in time and space. There's a verse that is verse 16 of Uludunapadu. When Bhagavan first composed it, he composed in a slightly different form. In Uludunapadu, he's talking about time and space. But in the original form of the verse, which I think that he composed it in one form, and the same day he rewrote it in another form, but the original form is verse 12 in Upadesha Tanipakal. And oh no, sorry, not verse 12, sorry, verse 13. What he says there is, Namandri Naledu. Besides we, where is time? And then he says, Namme Nadadu, not investigating or not attending to ourselves. Nam udul endru enil. If we think we are this body because of not attending to ourselves, namme nal unnum, time will swallow us. That time will swallow us means death is going. If we take ourselves to be this body, death is going to come. Death is often referred to as in Sanskrit as kalam, time. Here Bhagavan used a Tamil word nal, which means nal can mean day, but in this context it means time. So if we take ourselves to be this body, time will certainly swallow us. And then he goes on to ask, Namodumbo, are we this body? Or but are we this body? Then he says, we are one now, then, and always. Therefore, we who have swallowed time alone are. So what he implies there is, if we investigate and know what we actually are, we will swallow time. So we have a choice. Do we allow time to swallow us, or do we swallow time? So long as we continue to rise as ego, time will swallow us time and time again. That is, we will undergo so many births, and for every birth there's a death. So that we will be swallowed by time again and again and again until we swallow time. And we can swallow time only by knowing what we actually are. So long as we rise as ego, we seem to be caught up in the flow of time. And then the next question is, and that all other moments which we consider to be past take place now when we think of them. Yes, again, that is true from a certain extent, in a certain sense. But I mean, both past and present exist in the present. So both past and future exist in the present. They're thoughts in the present. So yes, that's true in a certain sense. But it seems just like the present moment seems to be real, so long as we take ourselves with this body, the past and present also seem to be real. But what is actually real is not the present moment in the sense of the present moment as part of the flow of time. As part of the flow of time, the present is no more real than the past or future. What is it that makes the present seem to be present? It is the presence of ourself. Our own being is what gives that creates the illusion that this moment in time is the present, and that this place in space is the present place. It's the presence of ourself, of our being, that gives the illusion of a present time and a present place. And then to go on, you say that what we project is our prarabdha. How can it be so detailed? That is what we project. Yes, it is our prarabdha. Bhagavan is explained nicely in verse 6 of Arunachala Ashtakam. That is, the whole world is nothing but thoughts. The thoughts are nothing but a projection of our vasanas. But he's packed a lot of ideas in that verse 6 of Arunachala Ashtakam, but in just a seed form. So he says there, the projection takes place under the whirl of Maya. At other times, Bhagavan explained this more clearly, that the whirl of Maya, just like the the cinema picture is projected so long as the projector is whirling, so long as the film reel keeps on rolling. If the film reel gets stuck, what happens? The film gets burned because it can't. If the film remains for a few seconds in front of a very powerful arc light, the heat of the arc light will melt it. So it has to keep on whirling. So the prarabdha is what keeps it whirling. At other times, Bhagavan said the 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 prarabdha is like the film reel. The film reel it's already determined. While the film is running, you can't suddenly decide to change the scenes because it's already predetermined. It's been filmed and it's put on a film reel, and whatever is the director and the editor of the film decided should be shown, that alone will be shown. So the prarabdha is like that. It determines what we are to project. What is projected is our own vasanas, but which vasanas are to be projected as the external world is determined by prarabdha. And regarding detail, this is the nature of Maya. Maya is said to have two powers, Avarana Shakti and Vikshepa Shakti. Of course, these are not two independent powers. That is, Arvana is the power of veiling. That is the power by which we mistake ourselves to be something other than what we actually are. So our varana is what we experience as the false awareness, I am this body, because this is what veils what we actually are. Without that veiling, none of this projection could take place. The second power of Maya is Vikshepa. Vikshepa means scattering, dispersing. So all this projection is Vikshepa. And it is the whole universe. It's full of, the more we look at the universe, the more detailed it becomes. Previously, before the advent of modern science, we didn't know about people had ideas about atoms. Atoms is a very old idea it's there in ancient Indian philosophy, and I think it was there in Greek philosophy, but they're very small, basic particles of matter. But with modern science, we now understand the atom is made up of electrons and protons and neutrons, and they've gone further and they've now found quarks and this and that and quantum effects and everything. This is the nature of Maya. The more carefully we look at it, the more detailed and complicated it becomes. And it reaches the point of when we come to quantum mechanics, in a certain sense, we can say quantum mechanics makes no sense at all. There are so many paradoxes of quantum science. I don't understand the science, but it's full of what seem to be contradictions, and it doesn't seem to be logical. But quantum science has come about how? By our looking more and more at it. The more we look at the appearance, the more complicated the appearance seems to become, and the more difficult it becomes to explain it. So, but this is all a mental fabrication. It's all the world as we see it to our five senses, and the world as we have constructed it through our science with all its quarks and quasars and whatever, and quantum this and that, and quantum foam or whatever it is, all this, it all only exists in the mind. And the mind can create an incredibly detailed picture. But this is just the nature of the Vikshepa Shakti, the power of scattering. And as Bhagavan explained in the cinema analogy, what we see as the world is a projection of our vasanas. That is, he likens our vasanas to the film reel, and the world to what appears on the screen. But the film reel isn't all our vasanas. It's a selection of vasanas that have been selected by grace for our spiritual benefit. Litter dropped on the pavement by someone, a bird sitting on a branch, a mug left on the kitchen table, a crack on the wall. Yeah, all these things are there. And as I say, this is only the detail that we see so long as we're using our unaided senses. If we look closer through all these modern scientific instruments, it becomes even more detailed, even more complicated. But it's all just Maya. It's all just a mental fabrication. Maya is nothing but the mind, as Bhagavan often emphasized. Is it that ego remembers its projection, and next time when it rises again, which is always the first time, it adds to its projection new element? It's not a matter of remembering. That is, the seeds of this projection is of the vasanas. So it's the same vasanas that are being projected time and time again. That's why the world we're experiencing now is not the same world that we experience in dream. But so long as we're dreaming, it seems to be the same world. So it's all, why does it seem to be the same world? Because of it's the same vasanas that have projected this world also project that world in dream. So the world in dream seems to be very familiar. We visit familiar places and so on, and we're familiar with our identity, whatever is our identity in the waking state. We seem to have the same identity in dream, and we meet people in dream who we know in the waking state. So it's all part of the same projection. And sometimes we see things in dream, and subsequently we see the same or something very similar in waking state. And it seems to us, oh, the dream was a predictive dream or whatever, but it's all because it's all the same vasanas that are being projected. So it's all only a mental fabrication, manokarpana. And that manokarpana, the details that make up that fabrication is the vasanas. The technical term Bhagavan used in Nana and elsewhere is Vishaya Vasana. Vishaya means object or phenomena. Vasana means an inclination. So the Vishaya Vasanas are the inclination to experience certain Vishayas, certain phenomena. So the phenomena are nothing but a projection of our Vishaya Vasanas. So if we had no Vishaya Vasanas, if we had no inclination to experience any Vishayas, there would be no rising of ego, no projection, nothing. It's all because as ego, we have these, it's a very the vasanas are not ego, but it's the nature of ego to have vasanas. Because as Bhagavan says in verse 25 of Uludunapadu, he describes the ego as a formless phantom, a formless demon, actually, more precisely from phantom. Uruvatrapeya hande. When he says it's formless, that means it has no form of its own. If it has no form of its own, it's got no separate existence of its own. So how does ego seem to have a separate existence? It seems to have a separate existence only because it projects and identifies itself with a form. So he says there, grasping form, it comes into being. Grasping form, it stands. Grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes abundantly. Leaving form, it grasps form. So the very nature of ego is to grasp form. It cannot rise, it cannot stand, and it cannot feed itself and flourish without constantly grasping form. And since the forms have no existence independent of ego, grasping form means projecting and attaching ourselves to the forms. So the first form we attach ourselves is to the form of this body consisting of 5 sheaths. Since the nature of ego is to constantly cling to forms, it has strong inclination to cling to forms. So the forms, what Bhagavan refers to there as forms, are the Vishayas, the objects, the phenomena, starting with this body which we take to be I. So the so as I said, the vasanas are not ego, but it is the nature of ego to have vasanas. You can't have an ego without vasanas. It's the very nature of ego to have vasanas. And that means we cannot get rid of the vasanas entirely without getting rid of ego. But we cannot get rid of ego so long as the Vishaya vasanas are very strong. So the aim of all forms of spiritual practice is to weaken the Vishaya vasanas. The Vishaya vasanas are the impurities in the mind. So purification of the mind means the weakening of the Vishaya vasanas. And only when we weaken the Vishaya vasanas to a considerable extent can we cut the root of the Vishaya vasanas. If you've got a very, very dense bush and you want to root it out, the first thing you have to do is you have to trim back the leaves and branches, because you can't even get at the root so long as there's a dense thicket of leaves and branches. But however much we cut back the leaves and branches, they keep on sprouting. So merely cutting the leaves and branches is not sufficient. We need to get at the root. So we have to cut the leaves and branches in order to get at the root, and then we need to cut the root. The root is ego. The leaves and branches are the vasanas. And the vasanas are the seeds that give rise to the whole projection.
In Vedanta, there is the concept of an adhikari, which stands for a qualified student who must have qualities such as viveka, discrimination, vairagya, dispassion, and mumukshutva, intense desire for liberation. Did Bhagwan ever speak on this and agree with these qualifications as prerequisites?
Bhagavan did sometimes talk about these. He did refer to these, but he didn't dwell on them much. One thing I was told by Natanananda, one of the questions he asked Bhagavan he recorded in Upadesha Manjari. That's a work that I think in English it's been translated under a title Bouquet of Instructions. But it's one of the works that are included along with Nana in Bhagavan's Tamil collective works. So one of the questions he asked is this path is this path for everyone? And Bhagavan said something to the effect, it's for those who are ready for it. And then Natananda asked, then what other means are there for those who aren't ready for this? And Bhagavan mentioned puja, japa, dhyana, so many things. Natananda told me, but he didn't record it in, this is what he had recorded in Upadesh Manjari. But sometime later, he asked Bhagavan, you mentioned these other paths, but my mind is not attracted to any of them. I'm only interested in this vichara. And Bhagavan said, yes, because if you're ready for vichara, you will not be, other things will not appeal to you. But if you're not, if you're not yet ready for vichara, you'll be drawn to these other practices. So Bhagavan said, the very fact that you are drawn to this path of Atma-vichara means you've already got the adhikari. So Bhagavan didn't emphasize much about adhikara, the qualification. I mean, he did. He translated Vivekachudamani, in which these are all dealt with in detail. And sometimes in certain contexts, he did talk about these things, but he didn't emphasize them very much, because what Bhagavan emphasized most is what, as he begins in Hana, we are all seeking happiness. The problem is we are seeking happiness in the wrong place. We're looking for happiness outside ourselves. So we sooner or later we will come to understand that the happiness we are seeking cannot be found outside ourselves. Once someone asked Bhagavan, though we read your teachings and we understand, it makes perfect sense that there's no happiness in the things of the world. Happiness is our own real nature. We understand all these things, but our mind is still going after this world. Why is that? Bhagavan just smiled and said, because you've not yet had enough of it. So we all have to, this spiritual path is a process we go through. The very fact that our mind is still going outwards means we still have a taste in experiencing all this world. And this is what the spiritual practice is all about, weaning our mind off its inclination to go outwards. In other words, it's Vishaya vasanas. The most effective way to wean the mind off Vishaya vasanas is to turn our attention within. But not everyone is ready to do so. So other practices are prescribed. That is, weaning the mind off its Vishaya vasanas, as I said earlier, is what is called chitta suddhi, purification of mind. Because the impurities in the mind are the root impurity is ego, but the impurities we initially have to deal with are the Vishaya vasanas. So what is called purification of mind is nothing but a weakening of the hold of Vishaya vasanas. In verse 2 of Upadesha Undiyya, he says very clearly, karma cannot give liberation. But then in verse 3, he says, nishkarmiya karma, done for God. Nishkarmiya karma means action that is done not motivated by desire for any result. So how can we do action without desire for any result? We can do it only if we're doing it for the love of God. That's why Bhagavan says he connects the bhakti and the bhakti marga. He doesn't take the karma marga, the path of desireless action, to be separate from the bhakti marga. So he says, kartanu karkum nishkarmiya karma. Nishkarmiya karma done for God. That implies done for the love of God. Karate tiriti, pure, cleansing the mind, purifying the mind. Gati varikambikam, it will show the way to liberation. That is, nishkarmiya karma is not in itself a way to liberation, or at least it's not a direct means to liberation, but it will purify the mind and thereby show the way to liberation. Show the way, the literal meaning of kambikam is cause to see. It will make us see what is the way to liberation. How will it do so? By giving us the clarity to understand that liberation cannot be attained by anything that we do. It can be attained only by being. And that in order to be, we need to stop attending to anything else by attending to ourselves. Attending to ourselves is the only means to be as we actually are, and thereby to free ourselves from all karma. So, and then he goes on to deal with the different types of nishkarmiya karma. He said there are three types. There are three instruments of action: body, speech, and mind. So there are three types of nishkarmiya karma. The actions of the nishkarmiya karma done by body is puja, done by speech is japa, done by mind is dhyana. And he says in this order, each is superior to the previous one. So better than the puja is the japa, better than the japa is the dhyana. Then he details in the next few verses each of these. But then in verse 8 he says, rather than anya bhava means, in this context, it means meditating on God as something other than ourselves, or worshipping God as something other than ourselves. Rather than anya bhava, ananya bhava. Ananya means what is not other. So, and he clarifies what he means by ananya bhava by saying, avanaha mahum ananya bhava. That is ananya bhava in which he is I. So when we have understood that God, when by all the previous practices, we come to understand that God is not something other than ourselves. He is that which he's our own very being. He's that which is shining in our heart as I. Then we will be drawn to meditate on nothing other than I, because that is the true form of God. That is Atma-swarupa, is Kadabal Swarupa, Deva Swarupa. The real form of God is nothing but Atma-swarupa. So we will meditate on that Atma-swarupa. And then Bhagavan says, rather than Anya Bhava, Ananya Bhava in which he is I, Anatinam Uttamam, it is best among all. That means it's the most effective means of purifying the mind. So all the other practices, they can also help to some extent to weaken the Vishaya Vasanas. But the most effective of all means to weaken the Vishaya Vasanas is this practice of Ananya Bhava, meditating on nothing other than ourselves. In other words, Atma-vichara. So this is the most effective means to purify the mind, and it's the only means to cut the root of the mind, which is ego. I've now forgotten what the question was. Have I answered the question, or
Yeah.
what was the question again?
Yeah. Actually, it's written 3 questions. My goodness, Krish. Now, the first one was, in Vedanta, there is the concept of an adhikari.
Oh, yeah.
Which stands for a qualified student.
Yeah. Well, if we're drawn to the path, to Bhagavan's path of Atma-vichara, then we are an adhikari. That was the essence of what Bhagavan explained to Natananda. Because many people read Vichara Sangraham, Upadesha Manjari, and they're a bit put off. So, but because I asked Natananda about this, he was very, very emphatic. But what Bhagavan meant by that is that we don't have to worry about the adhikar. If we are attracted to Bhagavan's path of Atma-vichara, we have the necessary adhikara. None of us have perfect viveka or perfect vairagya or tivra mumukshutva. Or at least most of us don't have that yet. But the very fact that we're drawn to this path means we have these to a sufficient extent. And how to cultivate these qualifications is by practicing Atma-vichara. The more we practice Atma-vichara, the more we'll gain viveka, vairagya, and mumukshutva. For those who are not so familiar with the Sanskrit word, viveka means discrimination, discernment. Technically, they say nitya vastu viveka, distinguishing the eternal from the ephemeral. That is, among all the things we experience, everything is temporary. The only thing that is permanent is this fundamental awareness I am. So if we can't distinguish that, we can't even begin on this path. So we need to have at least a certain ability to recognize that what is permanent is only our own being. And to the extent to which we recognize that clearly, we will, our desire for other things will diminish. So we gain vairagya. And the other side of the vairagya is the intense love to know what we actually are. That is what is called mumukshutva.
Michael, didn't Shankara Viveka Chudamani, the fine crest jewel of discrimination,
Mm.
in that the qualities of the fit student, were there 7 qualities or 5 qualities?
Yeah,
or
yeah. There's also the samadhi shaka sampatti. That is, it's actually 4, and the third one is divided into 6. So total there are 9. But
yeah,
we
9
need not
qualities.
go into all the details
Yeah,
of that.
that's right. But you had done a very nice presentation where you did the Chatushram, what was it called again?
Yeah,
The,
there's an article I wrote in my blog about a little over a year
no,
ago,
you
I
had a
think.
video too, which
Yeah,
you
I
did.
think so. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes.
The next question is the question to whom a more penetrating means of initiating inquiry and a more accurate pointer than the question, who am I, which seems to be the central question associated with Atma-vichara?
Um, if we're thinking of to whom and who am I in terms of being questions, this is all the preliminary that we need to understand. But what we are is not this. Is not any phenomenon. To whom do all the phenomena arise? To me. That we need to understand. That is the prerequisite understanding. But when it actually comes to applying these, Bhagavan didn't ask us to question to whom. He didn't ask us to question who am I. He asked us to investigate to whom, investigate who am I. So what does he mean when he says investigate to whom? Why do we need to investigate to whom? So long as our attention is going outwards, all this world, which is nothing but thought, appears. To whom does it appear? Investigating to whom means turning our attention away from whatever has appeared back towards ourself, the one to whom it has appeared. So investigating to whom means turning our attention back to ourself. Having turned our attention back to ourselves, what should we do? We don't allow it to, we don't just let it go back again. We try to hold on to that self-attentiveness. Holding on to self-attentiveness is what Bhagavan means by investigating who am I. That's why in the 6th paragraph of Nana, I'll get it and I'll read it sentence by um, um, he first starts saying, Nana ennam vicharane yanalaye manamadangam. Only by the investigation, who am I, will the mind cease or subside or dissolve forever. Nana ennam nenevu, matra nenevu galay ellam aritu pinnum sudi tadipol mudivil tanum ariyam. The thought, who am I? By what he means here by the thought, who am I, is not the verbalized thought, who am I. He's using the word thought here as a metaphor for investigation. The thought, who am I, destroying all other thoughts, will itself in the end be destroyed like a corpse burning stick. That is, a stick that is used to stir a funeral pyre to ensure that the corpse is burnt fully. So when he said the thought, who am I, will destroy other thoughts, he's obviously not talking just about the word, thinking the words, who am I. The thought, who am I, means the investigation, the self-attentiveness. So this will destroy all other thoughts, and in the end itself it will be destroyed, because then that is, so long as the mind exists, the nature of the mind is to go outwards. The thought, who am I, means the keeping the attention on ourself. That effort to keep the attention on ourself is necessary so long as the mind remains, because otherwise it'll go out under the sway of vasanas. But if we hold on to that self-attentiveness, that will destroy all other thoughts, and then the effort to hold on to self-attentiveness will be destroyed. That's what he implies there. Now we come to the bit which is relevant to what we talked about. If other thoughts rise, without trying to complete them, it's necessary to investigate to whom they have occurred. It's very important to observe here that he says it's necessary to investigate. Unfortunately, in many translations, vicharika vendum, is necessary to investigate, has been translated as it's necessary to inquire. That has given many people the wrong impression, but we have to ask to whom. That is the problem with the English verb inquire. It can be used in two senses. It can be used in the sense of investigate. It can also be used in the sense of ask a question. That's why it is, to avoid that ambiguity, it's better to translate vicharika vendum as it is necessary to investigate. We're not just asking questions. There's no benefit in asking questions. We need to investigate. Investigating to whom means turning our attention back towards ourselves, the one to whom the thoughts have appeared. And when here he's using vichari. Vichari is a verb in Tamil. It's in Sanskrit, I think the original verb is vichar. And it's from that verb vichara, that the noun vichara comes. In Tamil, the verb is vichari. What is that investigation? He is very clearly defined in the 16th paragraph of Nana, in which he says that the name Atma-vichara refers only to always keeping the mind on oneself. Keeping the mind on oneself means keeping our attention on ourselves. So when he says vicharika vendum, it's necessary to investigate to whom they have appeared, he means it's necessary to turn our attention back to ourselves, the one to whom all thoughts appear. And thoughts here doesn't just mean the mental chatter. According as he made very clear in the 4th paragraph, the whole world is nothing but thoughts. So what he means by thought is any mental phenomena. It includes perceptions, memories, thoughts, feelings, emotions, all these things. Any phenomena is just a thought. So whatever may appear, to whom does it appear? And then he says, however many thoughts arise, so what? So we shouldn't be concerned about the rising of thoughts. What we should be concerned about is attending to ourselves. So in the next sentence, he says, jagratei. That means vigilantly, wakefully. Literally, jagratei means wakefully, but used in the sense of vigilantly. Obvaru enamum kalambum podu. At the very moment that each thought arises, idu yaraku undayatru endru vicharital enakendru tondrum. If we investigate to whom, it will be clear to me. That is, to whom does all this appear? It's to me. So when he says it will be clear to me, enakendru tondrum, that tondrum, he's using it here in the sense of be clear, but it also means to appear. But it becomes so clear to us that it's to me. It only becomes clear to us if we are fixing our attention on ourselves. So when he says it's we have to vigilantly, as soon as any thought arises, we need to vigilantly investigate to whom it arises. Actually, we need to be vigilant, not to allow the mind not to be to be distracted by any other thought. So as soon as each thought arises, if we investigate to whom, it'll be clear to me. What that implies is we turn our attention away from whatever appears back towards ourselves. Having turned our attention back towards ourselves, we need to hold on to that. So in the next sentence, he says, Nana Indru Vicharital, if we investigate who am I. What he means here by investigate who am I is if we hold on to the self-attentiveness that we've just achieved by turning our attention back to ourselves. So Nana Indru Vicharital, Manam tam pirapiditiku tirumbividam. The mind will return to its birthplace. Its birthplace means the source from which it rose. In other words, by holding on to self-attentiveness, the mind will subside back into its birthplace, into our being. Arunda manamum adangividam. The thought that had risen will subside. Why will the thought subside? Because thoughts arise only in the mind, in our awareness, in the field of our awareness. If we turn our entire attention back towards ourselves, we are withdrawing our attention from the thoughts, and deprived of our attention, the thoughts cannot stand. So the thought will also subside. So the mind will subside back into its birthplace, or will return to its birthplace, and the thought will also subside along with it. Then he says, this is very, very important, Ipadi paraka paraka, by practicing and practicing in this manner, manataku tam pirapeditil tangi nikam shakti adikari kindridu. For the mind, the power, power or strength to stand remaining firmly in its source will increase. So he's not talking here about asking to whom or asking who am I. He's talking about investigating. Investigating to whom means turning our attention back towards ourselves. Investigating who am I means holding on to the resulting self-attentiveness.
What is the relationship between practicing self-attention in daily life with work and other obligations, and doing it as a kind of meditation practice when one is alone? Is it necessary to sit down and do Atma-vichara?
Bhagavan says in the 11th paragraph of Nana, there's a very important, very nice and very important sentence in which he says, Oravan tan swarupa te adeyam varayal nirantara swarupa smaranaye kai patruvanayin adu andre podam. That means if one holds on to nirantara swarupa smarana, that means uninterrupted self-remembrance until one attains swarupa, one's own real nature, adu andre podam, that alone is sufficient. So the primary practice taught by Bhagavan is to try to hold on to the self-attentiveness or self-remembrance, as he refers to it here, uninterruptedly. So that is our primary practice. That is what we should be trying to do throughout the day. Whatever else we're engaged in, we should try to be holding on to self-remembrance, remembrance of our swarupa, our own being. There are times in the day when we're not when there's no other demands on our time or our attention. At such times, we can focus a bit more deeply on ourselves, so we can go a bit deeper within. But we cannot go deep. The extent to which we can go deep within when we are in those moments when we're free, when there are no other demands on our attention, is determined by the extent to which we try to hold on to self-remembrance throughout the day uninterruptedly. The more we are holding on to that, the more the mind will subside, and then the deeper we'll be able to go when we are free of other distractions. So it's good to try to go deeper, but we won't succeed in going deeper if we haven't been practicing, trying to hold on to that self-attentiveness constantly. That's why when Bhagavan defined in the 16th paragraph, when he defined what is Atma-vichara, he started with the word sadakalamam, which is a very emphatic way of saying always. That is, sada means always, kalam means time, and that is a suffix in Tamil that implies all. So it's in effect, it's a very strong way of saying always. Manate, sorry, sadakalamam manate atmavil vaitirupatu. Vaitirupatu means fixing or placing or keeping manate, the mind, atmavil, in atma, in oneself. So keeping our attention on ourself always, that is Atma-vichara. So our aim should be to try to be self-attentive as much as possible. We shouldn't be disheartened if we're not able to hold on to it always. I mean, I don't think any of us are, but that is what we should be aiming for. So just like there he said sadakalamam, always, here he said nirantara. That means unbroken self-attentiveness, self-remembrance. Tell use this smarana. Smarana means remembrance. It's another way of saying attentiveness. So we need to try to hold on to at least a certain degree of self-attentiveness, self-remembrance throughout the day. That is the primary practice taught by Bhagavan. The question used the word meditation. What is meditation? Meditation means fixing the mind on something. So this fixing the mind on ourselves is what Bhagavan in the 10th paragraph, he uses the term swarupa dhyana, meditation on oneself. That means self-attentiveness. So it's to meditate, we don't have to sit with eyes closed. We should be meditating on ourselves throughout the day. In other words, we should be trying to hold on to that self-remembrance to the extent possible, as much as possible, as constantly as possible. We should look upon that as the primary practice. Otherwise, if we think we can, I'll meditate for 20 minutes morning and evening, and then the rest of the day I'll be allowing my mind to wander here and there. If we do that, when we sit for those 20 minutes morning and evening, our mind is going to continue wandering here and there. So it's not going to be very effective. So this is a practice, not just, this is not a part-time practice. This is full-time. Or at least as much as possible. We should be aiming to make it a full-time practice.
The next question is it the force of grace that causes the projected body, etc., to be time limited?
Yeah, ultimately it's grace that is controlling the whole thing. So well, firstly, it's the nature of the body. Anything that, as Bhagavan said, anything that appears will also disappear. This body has appeared at one time, some few years ago, and a few years hence it's going to disappear. This is inevitable. It's just the nature of prakriti, of manifest, of whatever is manifest. Whatever becomes manifest will also become unmanifest. It's just the nature of things. So when the body is going to die, that is determined by prarabdha. And the prarabdha is determined by grace. That is, it's grace that selects the fruit of our past karmas for us, which fruit are most appropriate for us to experience in this lifetime. So the length of how long the life remains in this body is determined by prarabdha. And prarabdha is determined by grace. So ultimately, yes, it's grace that determines everything.
Yes, thank you, Michael. Thank you. That really helped. Thanks very much.
Yeah. Um, Bhagavan sometimes said, whether you call it prarabdha or you call it God's will or you call it grace, it's all the same thing. Because the prarabdha is what is allotted by God's grace or God's will, whatever we want to call it.
Yeah, yeah, that makes good sense for me. Thank you very much.
All right. Okay, thank you.
The last question, how to deal with if, in spite of doing self-inquiry, heavy emotions like fear and sadness and self-destructive thoughts are returning again and again, though I try my best to observe the source of all this, they return again and again. How to get free from that negativity effectively?
What was the answer given by Krishna to Arjuna? Abhyasa and Vairagya. It's only by practice. And the Vairagya is cultivated by the practice that we can succeed in this. Thoughts of all types come to us constantly throughout the day. As Bhagavan said in the 10th paragraph, he says, Tondru totu varukindra vishaya vasanegal, cuddle alegal pole, like waves on the ocean. They're constantly rising. That is, all mental activity is nothing but the dancing of the Vishaya vasanas. So they appear like the waves on the ocean, ceaselessly. So long as we are living a totally worldly life, allowing our mind to go out all the time, if we talk to people who've never tried to turn the mind within, or at least have not at least even tried to meditate in any way, when we talk about Vishaya Vasanas, it won't be very clear to them what we're talking about. But try any form of meditation, and you'll very quickly become aware of the nature of Vishaya Vasanas. They're constantly rising. All mental activity is nothing but the ceaseless rising of Vishaya Vasanas. That is, all the seeds that give rise to thoughts are Vishaya Vasanas. That's why Bhagavan says they rise in countless numbers like ocean waves. And those vasanas come from where? They come from time immemorial. We've been cultivating these vasanas for countless lives, so they have great force. But of course, they've got no force of their own, because ultimately, what are the vasanas? There are our own likes and dislikes. So it's we who that is, whatever power they seem to have is power that they derive from us. And how do we give them the power? The more we allow ourselves to be swayed by any particular vasana, in other words, the more we allow ourselves to be carried away by any particular vasana, the stronger it becomes. So if we want to weaken vasanas, we need to refrain from being swayed by them. And the most effective way to do so is to hold on to self-attentiveness. If you meditate on anything else, if you meditate, say, on a name or form of God, or on chakras or kundalini or whatever it may be, those things are all Vishayas. They're all things other than ourself. So it's good to meditate on a name or form of God. The key to that is love. Doing so with love weans the mind off its concern with other things. We learn to trust in God more and more. So that's a very effective practice, but it is not as effective as self-attentiveness, because self-attentiveness, we are denying all Vishayavas, and that is, we're not allowing ourselves to be swayed by any Vishayavas whatsoever, because we're holding on to our being. Our being is not a Vishaya. It's so that's why Bhagavan sometimes talked about two types of vasanas, Sat Vasana and Vishaya Vasanas. Vishayas are innumerable, and so are Vishaya Vasanas. Sat is one, and so is Sat Vasana is one. Sat Vasana is the inclination, the liking, the love to attend to ourself. That is what we are cultivating by practicing self-attentiveness. And to the extent to which we hold on to our being, we refrain from being swayed by any Vishaya Vasana. So the Vishaya Vasanas lose their strength and the Sat Vasana gains in strength. So once again, practice, practice, practice. That's the only way. Some thoughts have very great emotional force. Those thoughts we very easily get carried away by such thoughts, because the emotional power is a very strong power behind them. But we can overcome even those we can overcome by holding on to self-attentiveness. He says in this sentence, this first sentence of paragraph 10, even though Vishaya Vasanas, which come from time immemorial, rise in countless numbers like ocean waves, they will all be destroyed when Swarupa Dhyana increases and increases. Swarupa Dhyana means meditation on our own being, in other words, self-attentiveness. When he says increases and increases, when the more we attend to ourselves, the more the vasanas will be destroyed.
The next question is, if being self is a perfected and whole state, why would there be a need for grace? I don't understand why you need any force or power in a perfected state of being.
The perfected state of being is the state of grace. It's because we are not, because we seem to have risen as ego, and when we rise as ego, we limit ourselves and thereby limit our power. So the remaining unlimited portion of our power, the power of our own real nature, is the grace we are talking about. That grace is not something other than ourselves. It's great. It's our own real nature. To put it in theistic terms, God and his grace are not two different things. God and his power are not two different things. They're one and the same. So God is our own being, and that power of God, the power of grace, is our own being. So why do we need grace to hold on to our being? Because grace is that very being we're holding on to. So we need to stop thinking in terms of in dualistic terms. We need to recognize that Bhagavan is very clear. There were some verses of Guru Vācaka Kōvai that I talked about a few months ago, in which Bhagavan said, grace is our very being. So, of course, we need the help of our being to hold on to our being. I mean, it's if we rely on the strength of ego, we will certainly be destroyed. We'll certainly fail, because ego is Maya. The only power that is greater than Maya is the power of grace. Not that they are essentially two different powers. If there's only one power, when we misuse our power to go outwards, that's called Maya. But when the original power pulls us back within, that is grace. So Maya is nothing but our own misuse of the power of grace. That's why we need to we need to yield ourselves back to that power of grace. Instead of misusing it, we need to allow it to draw us back within. Grace is that power that pulls us back within.
When we look through the windows of a building, we can clearly see objects such as furniture, etc. But what objects are we exactly looking at when seen through the eyes of another, whether it be a stranger, an animal, or someone we know? As it is often said, the eyes are windows to the soul and mind. I often feel I can't answer. Did Bhagwan ever talk about this?
That we can never see through the eyes of others. We can empathize with others, and by empathy we can appreciate how things appear to them, but we're never literally seeing through the eyes of others. What we all need to see is not anything external. It is, we need to see the seer. We need to, or to put it even more precisely, we need to see the underlying reality of the seer. The seer is ourself as ego. But this is not what we actually are, because ego is the adjunct conflated awareness. I am this body. So the nature of ego is to be, two defining characteristics of ego is, or are, as ego, we're always aware of ourselves as I am this body. And consequently, we're always aware of other things. So long as we're attending to anything other than ourselves, we cannot we cannot we are caught up in ignorance. We cannot know what we actually are. How can we see into the soul of another if we don't see into our own soul? So if we want to see into the soul of another, we need to look within ourselves, see what we actually are. And when we know what we actually are, we'll know there are no others, or what appeared as others are nothing but our own self. So when it is said that the eyes of us are windows of the soul, yes, in a sense, we can often see in other people. We can see kindness in the eyes of certain people. We can see malice, cruelty in the eyes of other people. These are very, very. How do we recognize kindness in the eyes of one person and cruelty in the eyes of another person? This is something we know by intuition. We don't really know. Sometimes we may mistake a very kind person to be a very cruel person, or a very cruel person to be a very kind person. We're often deceived by others. So to say the eyes are the windows of the soul, yes, it's true to a certain extent, in a relative sense, but we are not. When we're talking about Bhagavan's teaching, we're not talking about relative knowledge. We're talking about absolute knowledge. And absolute knowledge has to be non-dual, because anything other than ourselves, the only thing we can be certain about is our own being. Many things seem to exist, but how can we know that anything other than ourselves actually exists? Because all these many things that seem to exist, they could all be just an illusion, a mental fabrication. So just because things seem to be doesn't mean that they actually are. The only thing whose being, whose existence we cannot doubt is our own existence. Because we must exist in order to be aware of anything. So the one certainty is I am. Our being and our awareness of our being. That's the only thing that is certain. And according to Bhagavan, that is the only thing that is real. Because all other things appear and disappear. Whatever appears and disappears doesn't, well, Bhagavan often used to say, what seems to exist at one time and not at another time doesn't actually exist even when it seems to exist. So all other things appear and disappear. They come into being and they cease to be. So how can we say any of them are real? So let us first know what is real, namely our own being. And then if there's anything else to see, let us see it then. But according to Bhagavan, when we know ourselves, there's nothing else for us to know. Because we alone are what actually exist. Other things seem to exist only when we rise as ego.